I'm Andreas Hamberger, and this is the Hamberger Report, where I cover AI governance, enterprise architecture, and the technology decisions that actually matter to the people who have to make them. If you find this useful, subscribe and hit the like button. It helps more professionals find the channel. Now let's get into it. On the 1st of March 2026, Iranian drones struck 3 Amazon Web Services data centers in the Gulf. 2 of 3 availability zones in AWS's Middle East region went offline. Banking collapsed, payments stopped, government services went dark. The Uptime Institute confirmed it as the first verified military kinetic attack on hyperscale cloud infrastructure in history. I'm Andreas Hamberger. This is the Hamberger Report, where I cover the orbital economy and what it means for AI governance on Earth. The entire value proposition of cloud computing rests on one abstraction: that your data is in the cloud somewhere, everywhere, untethered from physical constraint and immune to events that happen to specific buildings at specific addresses. On the 1st of March 2026, that abstraction came down with the buildings. The cascade was immediate. Emirates, NBD, HubPay, Snowflake, and Careem all reported disruptions. Consumer banking, food delivery, and government services across the Gulf went dark. As of the 11th of March, multiple AWS services in the region remained unavailable or degraded. Then came the detail that reframed the entire event. Multiple news organizations, including Fortune, reported that the US military had used Anthropic's Claude model running on AWS infrastructure for intelligence assessments and battle simulations during the conflict. The Pentagon's AI networks ran on the same commercial servers as civilian banking and healthcare data. Iran targeted the military compute. Civilian customers were collateral. Data centers are now demonstrably military targets on both sides of a live conflict. Infrastructure that was civilian at 8 a.m. can be military by 9 a.m. if the right workloads are co-located on the right servers. The cloud was never immaterial. It was always a building at a specific address. In the Space Mafia framework, the Hosting Loophole describes the gap between where data is processed and who bears the consequences. Civil organizations store data in commercial cloud infrastructure, unaware that the same physical racks process workloads for intelligence agencies and military AI systems. The AWS Gulf strikes are the hosting loophole materialized in concrete and fire. The Space Mafia framework uses a 3-clocks model to describe the tension between physics, regulation, and commercial ambition in orbital infrastructure. The AWS strikes require a 4th clock, applied now to terrestrial digital infrastructure. The physics clock Shahed 136 drones travel at approximately 185 kilometers per h from launch decision to impact. The warning window is minutes. No enterprise disaster recovery plan in the Gulf had accounted for this. The compliance clock sovereign data localization mandates forced organizations to host data inside specific geographic regions. Once those regions became conflict zones, compliance law offered no exit. Migrate across borders in violation of the regulation that mandated localization, or hold position and accept extended outage. Compliance law had no war clause. The industry clock, Gulf AI investment commitments made in 2025 assumed commercially stable infrastructure. That assumption is now under active reassessment. The conflict clock, the interval between geopolitical escalation and infrastructure destruction, is measured in hours. Operation Epic Fury launched on the 28th of February. AWS was struck on the 1st of March. Boards accustomed to planning in weeks and quarters now face risk that crystallizes overnight. None of these 4 clocks appeared in standard enterprise cloud risk assessments before the 1st of March 2026. All 4 should appear in every such assessment going forward. One final point on architecture. Multi-availability zone design assumes any single zone can fail without service interruption. The threat model is natural: floods, earthquakes, fires in a single facility. The threat model is not synchronized: kinetic strikes across multiple facilities in the same metropolitan blast radius. Multi-AZ is not multi-region. and none of those architectural choices address whether your provider's global infrastructure is currently being targeted by a state adversary. AWS has invested $75 billion in New Zealand, launching the Asia-Pacific New Zealand region in September 2025 with 3 availability zones in Tamaki Makaurau. New Zealand organizations running workloads on AWS include major banks, NZ Post, One New Zealand, TVNZ, Wellington City Council and Sharesies. New Zealand government agencies operate under a cloud-first policy. Auckland is not a conflict zone. This is not an argument about immediate physical risk. It is about provider-level systemic risk. AWS is a single global organization. Its financial stability, operational capacity, and supply chain are global. Sustained military targeting of its facilities elsewhere is a material risk to the provider itself. Every NZ organization on AWS is co-locating on infrastructure owned by a company that has now demonstrably served military AI workloads alongside civilian data. New Zealand's Ground-Based Space Infrastructure Act carries a compliance deadline of the 29th of July 2026. The Act governs NZ-based satellite ground stations, exactly the kind of infrastructure connecting terrestrial data centers to orbital systems. The IHL dual-use doctrine now has a live precedent. Compliance planning should account for it. For organizations holding data on behalf of IWI or 1AU, kaitiakitanga requires that data be protected from exposure. It was never consented to. When the platform holding that data is demonstrably dual-use military infrastructure, data sovereignty moves from theoretical to operationally urgent. 4 questions for your board. First, does your cloud architecture account for kinetic military risk to your provider's global infrastructure? Second, does your business continuity insurance cover disruption from military strikes on your provider's facilities in other regions? Standard policies typically do not. Third, what is your migration path, and does your target provider carry the same dual-use exposure profile? Fourth, have you assessed NZ-owned sovereign cloud alternatives, SiteHost and Catalyst Cloud? These providers are beyond the reach of US military contracting and the Cloud Act. That architectural choice now carries a risk weight it did not carry on the 28th of February 2026. The submarine cable dimension adds a second layer. 17 submarine cables pass through the Red Sea, carrying the majority of data traffic between Europe, Asia, and Africa. With both the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea in active conflict zones simultaneously, both principal global internet transit routes face disruption risk at the same time. The entire data transit path from orbital connectivity through submarine cable to terrestrial data center is now physically vulnerable across all 3 layers simultaneously. This creates a business case for orbital compute that is simultaneously more compelling and more complex. If terrestrial data centers are legitimate military targets, the economic rationale for processing workloads in space strengthens, but the same dual-use vulnerability follows workloads into orbit. Orbital infrastructure that serves military clients is orbital infrastructure that adversaries can target. The governance gap does not close by moving the compute higher. It follows the compute wherever it goes. For those following the Gen AI series, the model generating the most commercial enthusiasm was simultaneously being used for military targeting in a live conflict. The governance gap is not about the model's capabilities. It is about the accountability structures around its deployment and the transparency of what else is running on the same infrastructure. The cloud was never immaterial. It was always a building at a specific address. On the 1st of March 2026, that address appeared on a military target list. The question every board should answer is direct. Does your cloud provider's facilities map overlap with any active or emerging military conflict zone? If you do not know the answer, your disaster recovery plan is built on an assumption that the 1st of March 2026 has already invalidated. If you are tracking what the commercial space race means for your organization's AI governance, subscribe to the Hamberger Report for daily insights. Subscribe to the Hamberger Report, new videos every day. That is the Hamberger Report for today. If this was useful, subscribe and hit the like button. It helps more professionals find the channel. You will find links to everything we covered in the description below. I am Andreas Hamberger, and I will see you tomorrow.